It was the 3rd of September. That day I'll always remember. Yes, I will. 'Cause it was the day that my daddy died. I never got a chance to see him. Never heard nothing but bad things about him. Mama, I'm depending on you to tell me the truth. Mama just hung her head and said, son, Papa was a rolling stone. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. And when he died, all he left us was alone. Papa was a rolling stone, my son, yeah. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. And when he died, all he left us was alone. Hey, Mama, is it true what you say that Papa never worked a day in his life?
And Mama, some bad talk going around town saying that Papa had 3 outside children and another wife. And that ain't right.
Heard them talk about Papa doing some storefront preaching, talking about saving souls and all the time reaching, dealing in that and stealing in the name of the Lord. My Papa was a rolling stone. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. And when he died, all he left alone. Hey, Papa was a rolling stone. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. And when he died, all he left was alone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's EDU on Air presentation, Deployment and Admin Console Best Practice Basics. We've got a short URL for you here on the screen. It's ampd.it/admin basics, and Jessica's going to get that also up for you so that you can follow that link and have today's slide deck to take with you even after the presentation. So again, that's ampd.it/admin basics. And she's got that there on the screen for you as well. So again, welcome and thanks for joining us today. My name's Tom Woods from Amplified IT, and I'm our Google for Education training lead here at Amplified IT. My background is in information technology for around the last 30 years. I've been at Amplified IT for 5 years now, and previous to that, around 20 years in educational information technology, working at a school district and with IT for education and for students in schools. So that's a little bit of my background. Amplified IT, we're a technical consultancy company based out of Norfolk, Virginia, and we work primarily with schools and higher ed organizations in US and in Canada. And we work with everyone from a single independent school, maybe your 50, 100 students, all the way up to we've worked with 10 of the largest 15 school districts in North America. So we run that whole gambit of size. We've worked with over 4,000 different school districts and higher ed organizations, the equivalent of almost 24 million students. And we work on best practices around the management and administration of G Suite for Education and Google for Education with those school districts and organizations, working with the IT departments like yourself, most likely, on how that's set up and making sure it's set up to good EDU best practices. We were also the recipient of the Global Cloud Partner of the Year for Education Award from Google in 2017. And that was fantastic, and we're super proud of that and glad to be working today with Google to provide you with the information today. Our family here at Amplified IT, especially in the last year and a half or so, has been growing. So we have dozens of people at the waiting, at the ready to assist you with your journey in G Suite, whatever your goals and initiatives are. We've got people on the team, everything from sales to our consultants, to our technical services, to our labs tools and our partner tools that we can connect you with to make sure your rollout of G Suite for Education is successful. We've got a great link there at the bottom of the slide to our blog pages where we've got lots of different blog post articles on various aspects of G Suite for Education, new features, new updates, things like that. So that's another great link there for you to follow a little bit later if you want to do some reading on those. Today's agenda, we're going to go through these topics, given that a lot of you coming to us today are probably looking to start G Suite for Education, given the current circumstances, given the remote learning that you're maybe attempting to do, and the cloud, and G Suite for Education is a fantastic way to do that and support that for your teachers and students. We're going to go through these topics. We're going to take a look at the different versions of G Suite that are available to us. We'll take a look at actually creating your G Suite domain and what domain decisions and domain management looks like. We'll go through organizational units, getting that set up, making sure email is going to flow if needed, then take a look at user provisioning and how do we get our users created? How do we get our staff and students into this environment? And there's lots of different ways to do that. We'll take a look at general security, general service management as far as the services like Gmail, Drive, Calendar, Contacts. How are those provided to our users? How do we turn those on and off and manage those? We'll take a look at some good access and security best practices for G Suite for the admin console as well. And we'll round that off with something that everyone's going to have to be concerned with and definitely put some time and thought into, and that's what does Chrome management look like for your organization or your school or district. So we'll cover those topics in a little over an hour today, and that should provide you with lots of great information on where you can get started with G Suite. So first of all, what additions do we have available to us for G Suite for Education? There is the standard G Suite for Education. That is a free solution provided to all educational institutions. And again, we primarily focus on K-12 and higher education organizations. That gives you all the tools that you're probably a little bit familiar with: Gmail, Drive, Calendar, Docs, Sheets, Google Sites, etc. It adds Google Classroom to that suite. You get unlimited Gmail, unlimited storage for Google Drive. You also get access to Google Vault for the retention and safekeeping of all those records in Gmail and Drive and things like that, along the lines of records requests, investigations, things like that. Then you have Google Vault free and available to you with education as well. There's a link there at the bottom that will take you to those different G Suite editions if you want to read through those. And then also on the right, in the last year and a half or so, we have also a secondary option, and that's G Suite Enterprise for Education. We're not going to be focusing on that today, but it's great for you to know that that's available. That is a paid tier of G Suite for Education that provides and adds some additional features. And that is a lot of features that come from the business side of G Suite, from the enterprise side of G Suite, where some districts find those valuable. They want to take a harder look at their security stance. There's a lot of security information built into those tools, a lot of great analytics, a lot of great communication additions, as some of you may be familiar with Google's recent release of additional Google Meet enterprise tools to all of education due to the COVID crisis. So those features roll up into Enterprise for Education, and there is a cost for that per month. Per user per year. There's lots of information there on the link. The regular G Suite for Education will always continue to be a free tier, and will continue to get features and updates and additional pieces added to it by the team at Google, and that's what we're going to focus on today, and we'll take you through that. All right, so we're going to start first with domains. Now, probably step one, if you haven't spun up G Suite for Education at all yet for your school or organization, is making sure we select an appropriate name for that, an appropriate domain name. Obviously, that has to be unique out there in the world, so we have to go purchase that from a domain name provider, like a GoDaddy or whoever that would be. And you want that to be hopefully short and sweet. We've seen some really long names in our travels that ultimately are kind of cumbersome, make it difficult for students especially to type and things like that. So we're always trying to coach schools into picking something short that's going to be easy to use, that's representative of your school or organization. Makes a lot of sense. This name can coexist with your legacy system. So what do we mean by that? If you already have Microsoft Exchange or GroupWise or First Class or some other mail platform, and that's already sitting on something like yourschool.org, that's fine. That doesn't have to be a stopper by any means. We work with a lot of different schools and districts that spin up their G Suite environment intentionally with the same domain name as a pre-existing mail system or Active Directory system. That does create some challenges or some discussions that need to be thought through around what mail flow may look like. But the core interests of getting G Suite going, providing students with accounts, access to Google Drive, access to Google Classroom to do their work, things like that, will be totally fine. So in some circumstances, mirroring those domain names may be advantageous for you, maybe something you're looking to do. And then again, we just have to then have some conversations about mail flow, and we've got some information on some slides coming up that will discuss what mail flow can look like between Gmail and some of those other legacy systems. It's now possible also to change your primary domain name. We'll explain what primary means in a second. But if something already exists, or it was spun up by someone else, or you have a change of heart after doing that, you want a different name, it can be changed. Sometimes that can be a little bit more difficult depending on how far down that road you are, and more importantly, how many Chrome devices you've put into the system and things like that. But it is possible to change that primary domain name after the fact. And as great as that is, that option's there, we still really want you to put the proper time and thought and consideration into that name at step one, because then you can kind of set that and have it there and forget it and not have to worry about that down the road. So making sure that is the appropriate name is a good first step for sure. Some information down there, some links on domain support within G Suite, and some other information that you can follow on those links if you're in one of those particular situations and you want to maybe look at adjusting or changing. So we've selected a name. Now what do we do? Well, we need to create or register an account with G Suite for Education. We've got a link here. I'm going to go to that in a second. By going to that link, we create our G Suite for Education submission. That activates us a domain with an admin console and everything we would need under a 14-day trial. And then we have to be vetted. We have to have Google take a look at who we are, take a look at our organization, and they have various ways and various places that they go to look at that, your website, perhaps in North America, the NCES database, things like that. And they have to vet that you are a non-for-profit educational organization of the sort, and then they will officially upgrade that to the proper full G Suite for Education domain. Until that process happens, during that 14-day trial, we are not fully up and running, and we are not fully upgraded with things mentioned earlier: Google Classroom, Unlimited Drive, Google Vault, Unlimited Gmail, things like that. So what does that look like? I'm just going to follow this link here, and you have that link now there as well. We'll take you right to this page to sign up for G Suite for Education, and we've got the button right here on the screen that will do that for us. And we're not going to go through this whole process, but you can see here there's a bit of an online form that we step through, where we would maybe put in who we are, and that we're a primary or secondary or K-12, or maybe we're a higher ed organization. And then obviously we need to then put in our website, give Google an indication of how many overall staff and students we have. And this is probably not going to let me get too far before I'm going to get stopped here, but maybe we can get through to the next screen here. The country, wherever that may be, phone number, and then we get into further pages with address information, physical address of your offices and things like that. Once all that is completed, you will submit that, and very quickly, within a few minutes, they're going to create your account for you. One of the questions on this online form is what domain name you're choosing to go with. So you would put in abcschools.com or whatever name, as we said earlier, that you would decide. And you still then have to go through a few more steps of proving ownership of that domain name, so that you didn't just pick that domain name out of the air, or you're using a name that's maybe already in place for another organization. So that name will be put into this form submission. Once that's done, we'll go back to our slides here. We will have an admin console spun up, and we're going to take a look at what that looks like here in a second. One of the first steps we have to do once we have access to that temporary 14-day trial admin console is prove ownership of that abcschools.com domain name. And we do that through our DNS records. If we are able to access and make changes to DNS records, that proves that we own that domain name, whether that's self-hosted DNS or through a DNS provider out there on the internet. There's a quick verification phase to prove ownership, and then Google will then continue with that EDU upgrade process, and I'll show you what that looks like as well. A text record or a TXT record on your DNS is the most common and probably easiest way to verify ownership of that domain name. The admin console will walk you through how to do that, generate a string for you that you put in as that TXT record. Once it's in your DNS host, Google will then, from their side, check that, look for that string as a response back. That will prove that you own the domain. That will then kick off the EDU upgrade process at that point. You have to prove ownership first before the full EDU upgrade activation process starts to occur. Once you sign up for G Suite, you will receive an email similar to this one on the left, and I've grabbed this from a live example of a school that we've worked with and done this for. You'll receive this welcome to G Suite for Education, a bit of information, the privacy policy, the EDU privacy policy, lots of great links there, and then asking you to now sign into your new domain and get started. Once we sign into the domain, I'm going to jump over here to the admin console, and let's see if I'm still signed in or not. Of course, I have to sign back in here really quickly. One of the first places you're going to want to go once we're in our admin console for the very first time is to the domains area here on the main page. That's going to be the first step, and you'll probably see some banners across the top telling you that this verification step needs to be done. We're going to go into the domains section and manage domains. And what we're going to see is our primary domain, whatever name we had selected, abcschools.com or whatever it may be for you. And there's going to be indications here that this needs to be verified, that it is not yet verified. There's going to be typically a yellow exclamation mark icon, and that's telling us that we need to prove ownership of that name. That's when you then follow the instructions here to do that TXT record. Google's got themselves plugged in with a lot of the real common popular DNS hosts out there, like a GoDaddy, where you can even just provide your login and password to that DNS host service. They'll go in for you on your behalf. The robot will go in there for you on your behalf, automatically create that text record, do the whole thing for you. Pretty simple and easy to do. Once that verification is done, that will then kick off the EDU upgrade. And we've got an example here. Once that verification has happened, you should then see an email in your box to the address you used when you created the G Suite domain for the first time as the main contact, telling you that it's now being submitted for a request for educational upgrade. And again, that's getting the fully fledged suite with classroom, unlimited storage, Google Vault, et cetera, et cetera. At this point, Google's going to do their work in the background. They're going to check your website, check databases, look in different areas. They may come back to you and ask for additional information. You know, they may ask for some certificates, some tax certificates, an email from a principal of the school or organization on official, email or letterhead, things like that. So there may be some additional steps to prove your nonprofit educational status. Once that's done to Google's satisfaction, and they may have to come back and forth with you a couple times on some things, then the EDU upgrade will be finalized by Google. What that looks like, and the best place to see that is if we go back to the main page here of the admin console, you can go here to the billing section. And when we go to the billing section, what you're going to see originally when you first come in here is your G Suite for Education. It'll be the very top one. You won't have as many different things as I do in this demo domain. It'll be listed here as the 14-day trial. Once that validation has occurred, Google's checked everything, you've provided sufficient evidence, then this will change to look like this: G Suite for Education free subscription. That means you're good to go, ready to rock and roll. You have everything that you need, and you can begin, on the next steps that we're going to cover shortly. So billing area is going to be your best indication of where your current subscription status sits, and you're going to want to have a look there and make sure that looks the way it should. Aside from that, best practices around just getting to that admin console, admin.google.com is the URL, and that's in some of those initial emails welcoming you to your new G Suite account. But admin.google.com is all you really need to know. We do recommend, and we really train and coach the schools and orgs that we work with to always access the admin console through an incognito window. We really feel that that's a real safe way to do things. It's pretty temporary and transient. You can log in, get something done within a few minutes, and then close that incognito window. You're not leaving it open on your machine. There's nothing in the cache or the browser history around that. You're not leaving yourself open for any security risk that way. If you just get in, do something, close it, and get out of there. So incognito window, obviously in Chrome, we're speaking about here, is a really good way to access admin.google.com. And your very first time going to that and signing in, you're going to be using that username that you had to specify when you filled out that online form. You needed to make that initial account at abcschools.com or whatever name you're using. So maybe you used administrator or admin or Tom1 or whatever you want to put for that initial account. That's what you're going to be signing in as to get to that admin console. As far as domain management goes, we'll go back here to the console and we'll look at a few quick options to kind of get things rolling here. One of the other pieces of domain management that's possible for us here is multiple domains. So we do have our primary, abcschools.com, or in this example here, we've got an exampleschool.com. You can add additional domain names, and that might be something you might be interested in doing to support other services. Maybe you have continuing education at night and you want a different login, email address potentially for Gmail for those adult students so that they're not confused as your regular students and regular staff. Maybe there's a specialty program that you're running. All we do here by adding another domain name is just give people their own unique identities. We're all in the same G Suite account. We're all in the same Google Drive to share back and forth, Google Classroom, everything. There's no barriers or walls there. It's really just how people sign in and potentially what their Gmail email address may be if we're using Gmail. So additional domain names can be added and then verified in the same way with that text record, most likely. That's a great way to support those specialty programs, possibly. Some also have used this to just even visually separate staff from students. Students could be on a different domain name slightly, or a subdomain like student dot or s dot, or a totally different domain name, and that's totally fine as long as you own that different domain name and put it in here and verify it. Then you'll be good to go. The other option here is a domain alias. And a domain alias can be really useful for a few different things, testing and sandboxing things. But what we're doing here is we're adding an alias that every single user, every single staff and student are going to have attached to their account, possibly for mail flow. You don't sign in with an alias, but it can be there to support some other actions in the back end, like different ideas around mail flow. And when I mentioned earlier that legacy mail platform, whether that's Exchange or something else, can come in very handy for that. So you can make a domain alias of any name you like. Maybe this is the older domain name that your district or organization used a few years ago, like a .k12, .ny, .us, or something like that. You want people in the world to possibly, if they're going to email that, for it to still get to your users. So we can put in a domain name, domain alias, that would allow that mail to still land in their mailbox typically. We also use a domain alias for a lot of special routing around coexisting mail platforms with legacy systems like we mentioned. So domain alias, again, has to be for every single user. There's no way around that. Every staff, every student will have that, but that could be useful to have mail still be delivered from an old legacy account. MX records for Gmail or something else that perhaps you're going to need to set up. We've got a notification here, just in this test domain, something was added and the MX records aren't set properly. But on your DNS host, we set our mail exchanger records, or MX records, and those tell the world where mail should be sent for an exampleschool.com or whatever your domain is. So if you're going to be using Gmail for your primary, or you're going to be using Gmail for any of your domain names, then you're going to want to go to your DNS host and set up those MX records to point to Google servers. The link here on the slide deck is going to take you to the Google support page that lists the 5 different MX records and the waiting numbers and everything that you need to set those up properly so that that mail comes to Gmail within the G Suite environment. We already covered domain aliases. I was a little bit ahead on that one, but there's a bit more information, including a link at the bottom that'll take you, again, to the Google support page that will explain their purpose. And again, hopefully with me describing that, you kind of get the idea of where that could be used for old legacy domain names where you still want that possible incoming mail to be delivered. We've got some examples coming up of legacy coexistence where that could definitely be used to forward some mail as well. All right, before we get into that piece on mail flow, we're going to take our next stop. If this is just getting G Suite off the ground and we've got it validated and verified and upgraded to EDU and all that good stuff, we need an organizational unit structure. If you're familiar with Active Directory or a lot of other platforms, pretty much the exact same concept here. Organizational units are like folders that contain objects in our admin console in our G Suite environment here. So those things can be users, Chrome devices, now managed browsers as well, which is an object that lives in organizational units. Obviously, that's where we're going to contain those objects and therefore have easy ways to manage them by applying services and settings to those OUs, and that will affect every user or every device that is within that OU. We use those to turn core services on and off, the additional services on and off. So whether that's calendar, contacts, Hangouts, YouTube service, things like that, typically are done using the organizational unit structure. We have definitely seen that if this isn't done well with a lot of forethought, that can be very limiting and handcuff you later. So we're big proponents of putting the time and effort into a good OU structure plan so that it supports you well in the future. It's future-proofed. You can grow. You can use it in some unique ways and some very granular ways, and you're not getting stopped with, problems where, sorry, we can't do that because, that would have to be done too broadly to too many users or too many devices. So having a nice OU structure is going to support you well. We've got an example here of our typical recommended OU structure when we work with schools and organizations with a lot of our services. We get really deep into this, and it's going to end up being very customized to what you're trying to accomplish, to your unique initiatives and goals within G Suite. But in general, the premises here will remain the same. What we really like to focus on here is off of the root, which is going to be familiar to anybody who's used an OU structure before. That's the very top level where you start. We immediately break that down into staff and student. In the world of G Suite, we're very device agnostic, so we have to get ourselves out of that Microsoft frame of mind where we're doing a lot of things to workstations and OUs of workstations and installing software to workstations regardless of who's using them. That's not what we do in the cloud world and in G Suite. Almost everything and the way we approach everything is always a question of how are we going to do this for staff versus how are we going to provide or do this for students. So it makes a lot of logical sense for that to be the first layer of separation there. That's going to help us answer those big questions with, one place, one click. We can provide something to all students. We can provide something to all staff. That may be restricting something for all students. We could be, 500,000 students, one of the biggest districts, in the United States, and with one click, we could affect all students with a setting, with a restriction, provide them with something. And that's really where that benefit shines. So having that immediate staff-student breakdown is always going to work better for you in the world of G Suite versus maybe the alternative would be listing all your campuses or listing all your schools first. That can really start to fail on you quick if you have 50 schools, 100 schools. Every time you need to do something just for the staff or just for the students, you're going to have to do that in 50 or 100 places. And you can see where the inefficiency creeps in there. When we're talking about the staff OU, then below that, we have sub-OUs or nested OUs. And again, they really help us organizationally just keep things sorted. If we expect to apply certain settings, certain services to a set of users, then probably we would want an OU for them. So maybe the IT department, maybe various staff roles, and this could go as deep as you feel you need to, whether that's teachers, school administrators, finance department at the district office, things like that. You could break that down however you like. We have an OU here for our super admins, which is your highest level of access to the admin console, and we're going to talk about that in a second. When we come down here and look at our student structure, again, making a structure that's going to work well for us. When we talk about students, especially in K-12, one of the first things we do is we approach it usually in kind of 2 or 3 segments. Elementary, middle, and high, or sometimes just elementary and high, depending on where you are and how you're structured. And again, that gives us one place, one click to apply settings, provide something, set a restriction that would apply to all K-5 students or all 9 to 12 high school students with one click. There could be, 100 schools underneath this, as you can see here, but we've got that one place to administer settings and do most of the heavy lifting further up this structure like we would want to do, and not down at the other end. At that point, breaking this down into the various schools, the various buildings, the various campus buildings for your organization, if you're higher ed, whatever that needs to look like. In K-12, we then go down to a grade level. And again, we're trying to future-proof. And you may not use this right away, but being able to later apply something just to a 5th grade OU is a great way to support our teachers and not, again, be handcuffed and say, well, sorry, we'd have to apply that to the whole school, so we're not going to turn on Hangouts. Yes, we can turn on Hangouts for the 5th grade class because they're doing pen pals and remote video chat. We'll do that for, Mr. or Mrs. Smith's 5th grade class, and we can do that on that OU. And then maybe later when that unit is over, we can easily turn that off. So leaving the door open here for good flexibility and granularity really helps. We also, in purple here, are showing your Chrome device OUs, possibly under the school. We have different device OUs, maybe cart 1, cart 2, or maybe we have one-to-one versus shared Chromebooks and carts, or maybe you're using Chrome devices for digital signage, or you have a special OU for standardized testing and assessment you can move devices into, and they go into kiosk mode. Again, not reinventing the wheel and listing schools all over again in a separate Chrome device OU structure off the root. We already have all our schools here. Let's repurpose that and use it by nesting OUs to house the Chrome devices within here as well. Saves us a lot of time and space for sure. We've got some OUs here at the bottom around good best practices with just possibly offboarding graduates, midterm students that leave, or even staff. We've got a suspended OU for long-term suspended accounts, and you want to make sure you have a life cycle plan for things like that. And we have a test OU for sandboxing, testing things. Obviously, that's pretty common and something you're going to want to have as well. All right, and before we jump into email delivery, let me just make sure we go back and take a look at what that actually looks like here in the console. We have organizational units actually right here on the main page, along with users and some devices and a lot of other things. But we can build that OU structure right here under this interface. And it's just a matter of, you can see we've got that built here, down to the grades and possibly even further. And it's just a matter of, at whatever level you want, then creating a new OU and nesting those OUs however you need to build that. So we'd really recommend, before anything else happens, get that structure built, get that framework put in place, because everything you do after this, all the settings, all the services, is going to depend on this and hinge off this. So you want to make sure you get this part right first before you start throwing users into the system. Let's have a quick chat about email delivery. So back when we mentioned MX Records and that domain name situation, we did mention, Exchange or a legacy platform, and we could have the same name between Exchange, Active Directory, and G Suite. Maybe we're eventually planning a migration from Exchange to Gmail and G Suite. And in a lot of cases, for a lot of districts and organizations, that's in the cards for them, and there is maybe a migration plan. Setting up something called dual delivery is definitely possible. There's some information here on the slide. They're not too hard to follow, but again, if you're in the US or Canada and want to speak with us, we can definitely help walk you through this. Your MX records, in this case, would still point to your Exchange servers or your Barracuda or whatever that entry point would be. So someone out there in the world emails one of your users, that's going to be delivered to that legacy Exchange server. And then here's an example of us using that domain alias. And in this case, we're using the built-in domain alias that Google provides for every domain anyway, right out of the gate. That one's ready to be used. It's very convenient. We can deliver the mail to everyone's mailbox in Exchange, but at the same time, substitute the domain right of the @ with the domain alias from G Suite. Normally, we wouldn't be able to also deliver to G Suite because they share that same yourdomain.com name. When we send that out to the internet, it's just going to turn right back around and come back to Exchange. So we send it to John Doe or whoever the user is, but using the domain alias, that's going to hit the internet, the MX records for that domain alias or whatever you want to use here, point to the Google servers. That delivers to Gmail and G Suite. And now our friend John Doe has that email both in Exchange and also a copy of it in Gmail as well. And that's a great bridging situation to get your staff, get your users by until this summer when you do the full migration. They can start to use Gmail, get familiar with that. They can still use their legacy platform. Incoming mail is going to be delivered to both. But keep in mind, we're not in sync here fully in any degree. Sent items are not being synchronized between the two. Deleted items are not being synchronized. Think of this as almost like a BCC of incoming mail in the background, but it does dual deliver so people can start to get the feeling for Gmail in a new platform, and then you can make that changeover or that migration whenever you like. Another alternative when migration's definitely happening, or we're starting to pilot people into G Suite, we could actually change the MX records for our common shared domain name, yourdomain.com, to point to Google servers. People out there in the world would email our users. It will come into G Suite first. And a couple things can happen here at this point here in the center. If users exist in G Suite as accounts, then it could be delivered, and maybe you only create users per each pilot school as you roll them out. So do they exist? Yes, deliver. If they don't exist in G Suite, we can have routing rules in the admin console that then send the mail over to our Exchange servers, and it would be delivered there to their mailboxes for the people that are not part of the pilot. And then as we create new users, then their mail starts to go to Google. This can be if they're in a particular OU, deliver the mail, but if they're not in a particular OU, then send it to Exchange. This could be if they're a member of a Google group, pilots, then deliver it to Gmail. If they're not in the pilot Google group, then ignore them and continue to forward it and send it over to Exchange. So that's called a split delivery. Gives you an option to make probably a more rapid transition over to Gmail and get people migrated over in a little faster scenario. Eventually, you're not piloting it anymore. Everyone's in G Suite, and we turn off that forwarding, and we just go ahead with straight delivery to Google through the Gmail servers, and that's what that would look like. All right, so we've sorted out our mail flow, and maybe things are super simple. We don't have legacy systems. You're not needing to be as complex as what I just described in those slides, and you just need to set it up, point your MX records at Google, get this thing rolling, and get users created. So there's the next step, provisioning and creating users. So what are our options there? In the admin console, we can manually create users. So this is one by one. But to get those first few accounts made for folks in the IT department or that are on your team, that are the stakeholders rolling this out, that's a pretty easy thing to do. It can be time consuming. You would not want to do hundreds this way. But first name, last name, email address, and a password are really all that you need to create a user. That looks like this back here in the console. We're just going to go to the users area right here. And we can select a particular OU if we already know, where we want these users to live. So perhaps we have an IT OU here, and we can go to that OU. And then at that point, I'll just wait for the screen to catch up here. We've got options at the top to add a new user, and we can do that. And you can see here, we've got some required fields, first name, last name, the email address, and then a password are all that's actually required to get a user account created. There's additional attributes you can specify for users, but we're going to keep things pretty simple for today's purposes. Alternatively, we can bulk upload users from a CSV file. So you can set up a CSV with the appropriate pieces of information. There's a template here that we really recommend you use because it has the right column headers for first name, last name, email, password, anything else you may want. And that's a real quick way. Even a couple hundred users can be imported into a particular OU using that bulk import method. So CSV upload is definitely a great option. We can't add them to Google Groups or do a lot of fancy workflow after that, but it gets them into the system and gets them created pretty quickly. Another option for creating users, depending on how savvy you are, is to use a tool called Google Apps Manager. This is a free open source tool. It's a command line tool. So if you're familiar with PowerShell or anything like that, you're going to feel very at home with this tool. There's links here on where to get it. And a great link to the wiki page. This is accessing the APIs for basically anything you can think of as far as what's possible through the Google APIs and the admin console APIs. So we could, with this tool, create a list of users from a CSV and then possibly do some other actions, adding them to a group, doing other pieces with those users. So it's very flexible. It's kind of the Swiss Army knife, we always call it. We recommend someone in the IT department at every district or organization working with G Suite is familiar with this tool because it can really help. It can really save the day if you need to do a quick bulk operation or have an emergency or a problem. So that's a great tool to use, and you can script and use CSVs and things like that to create users in bulk with that tool as well. Another option, in response to some of these challenges, we have our Amplified Labs team of developers and our sets of Amplified Labs tools. They're lightweight, low-cost tools, a lot of them working through Google Sheets to do things in bulk and help you in a lot of creative ways. So this tool through Google Sheets can create user accounts in bulk, and at the same time can place them in their OUs, can add them to Google Groups, can set a lot of different attributes. You can mass suspend, you can mass enable. So we're talking even thousands of users at a time. So if you feel at home with spreadsheets and VLOOKUPs and formulas and all that great stuff, this is a great tool through Google Sheets that you can use, and there's a free trial if you follow the links there of this tool from us that can really help you get the ball rolling here. If you are not super comfortable with command line interfaces, this is a great GUI way to do this in the Google Sheets interface, and there's more information on those links. Another great tool here, Google Cloud Directory Sync, or GCDS. This synchronizes with your Active Directory system. A lot of you out there will have, and maybe will continue to have, Active Directory. This is a single direction from Active Directory to Google. This reads your Active Directory. It doesn't change anything. And it can then go to the APIs in the cloud for G Suite, and it can create users, suspend users, move them, rename them, create groups, synchronize and manage the membership of Google Groups, lots of other pieces as well. So this runs on site beside your Active Directory server, doesn't take much resource, and typically this is a tool that districts and organizations would run daily to take any changes to Active Directory and push those up to G Suite and keep those two very much in synchronicity with each other. So that's a free tool from Google to synchronize directly with Active Directory. G Suite Password Sync is another great tool that a lot of times goes hand in hand with the previous one, the GCDS Active Directory Syncer. This tool will take everyone's Active Directory password every time it's changed in Active Directory and go to Google and set their G Suite password to be the same thing. And again, every time a password is changed, and that's key, not reading current passwords, but every time a password's changed by the user, by administrators and the Active Directory users and computer snap-in, whatever the case is, this takes it, encrypts it on site on your server with Google's hash algorithm, and then sends the encrypted hashed result of that password out to the Google API to be saved as the user's Google password in G Suite. So pretty instantaneously, if they Control-Alt-Delete and change their password on a Windows workstation within your environment, their Google G Suite password is now the same thing. That can be super helpful, convenient, feels familiar. We're going to roll out G Suite, but you already know how to get into it because it's going to be whatever your Active Directory network password is, for the Windows machines. That can work really, really well for people. More information there on the link below. Also, we get a lot of requests on districts trying to work with their student information system, maybe as the source of truth. Maybe they don't have Active Directory or otherwise. We, in response to that, again, created a custom set of scripts as a tool called GFE, or Google for Education Sync. This typically is used with student information systems, but it could be used with other systems as well. It uses a CSV export to then, again, go to the APIs, create users, move users, suspend users, manage Google Groups, do a lot of other custom work. We work with you to configure this tool and set it up directly to your needs. And you get a little bit of training on that to then maintain that tool going forward. So that's a great option if you want to run and synchronize things direct from something like your student information system. All right, so let's take a look at Google Groups. Your next step is maybe going to be to put some thought into having some good and strong Google Groups. We create Google Groups through a few different mechanisms via the admin console, Groups for Business, or via the APIs like with Google Apps Manager or things like Python scripting if you're good with those kind of tools. And they're really key. So first of all, we have a Groups module here on the home page. We'll just go back and take a quick look at that right here. And you can see here we've got a lot of groups already created, but it's just a matter of creating a new group. And you can give the group a name and its email address here. You can, at this point, specify some owners of the group, and then the group gets created. Once the group exists, we can go into that group and we can add members directly here in the admin console. Those members can be owners, managers, or just a regular member, and those mean different things in the world of G Suite. We can rename the group, delete it, do any management that we want here. Another way to create groups is through a service, one of the core services called Groups for Business. We won't get into that today, but there is a potential there to even allow users like your staff that don't have access on a regular day to the admin console an interface where they can create Google Groups. Maybe you want to empower your schools themselves to make certain Google Groups, there at their school level, because they're aware of who those members need to be, like a math club or track and field or something like that. So through the Groups for Business service, that presents them with a web page where there can be, with the right settings, an option there to create a domain-wide Google group as well. We really want to make sure you're understanding what that means and that we're okay. We don't want sprawl and a million Google groups being created by our teachers and staff, but you could also empower certain people, key teachers at a school or people from your curriculum department or something like that, with that ability outside of the admin console through the Groups for Business interface. Obviously, APIs and scripting with GAM or otherwise is going to be doing that from an admin perspective, and you're going to be the ones probably running those scripts and getting that done. What types of groups do we have, real quickly? Not to be confused with what's really called labels, but personal contact lists. So when we go to something like contacts.google.com, you can make your own mailing list. It's called a label, but it's a collection of email addresses. Maybe this is a teacher making a list of parent email addresses for the students in their class. Only you see that. That's only for you to use when you're in Gmail. That has nothing to do with anyone else in the domain, in the G Suite account. So that's not a Google group. That is just a personal mail list, officially called a label, but we like to refer to that as more of a personal mail list or a personal contact list. You then have your Google Groups. We just looked at those. That main groups icon from the main dashboard is where you will find those. The next piece is the Groups for Business service, which I did mention. So let's go back and take a look at that real quick. We're going to, I'll just keep going back to the main page here. We're going to go to our core apps and services here. So we go into apps, and we have, for the most part, for today's purposes, focusing on these first two, we have our core services and our additional services. And these are coming up pretty shortly. We'll dive a little deeper. But we have the Groups for Business service here. If we turn that service on for an OU of users, they then have access to that service via the web, which is groups.google.com. There is a way to, again, give people the ability to create a Google group through that web page interface. But it also provides some additional features, some advanced features for Google Groups, like discussion forums and collaborative inboxes and things like that. So you may want to consider whether users in your environment are going to need the Groups for Business service as an additional set of features. It doesn't have to be on. It can be off for students. A lot of districts choose to turn it off for most of their staff, not needing those additional features, not needing them to create groups themselves. Then the Groups for Business service could potentially be off as a service. There's also an additional service called Google Groups. That one is the public Google Groups that Google runs out on the internet for people to participate in. So by turning on that additional service for an OU of users, you're allowing them or permitting them to sign into that global public Google Groups service out on the internet. That has nothing to do with your internal Google Groups that we're looking at right now, not to be confused with that. In most cases, many staff don't really typically need access to that, and for sure we like to recommend that that public Google Groups service under additional services is turned off for students, for sure. Why do we care about Google Groups in G Suite for Education? More and more important every day, it feels like. It's the same old story from Active Directory and everything else. You don't want to have to list 30 or 40 individual people. You don't want to have to do those kind of heavy lifting administration tasks. Using a Google group in a lot of cases is quick, easy, and dynamic. If you set a Google Drive permission and then later on the membership of the group changes, that just dynamically changes. People suddenly can't access the Google Doc, or people then can suddenly access the Google Doc, as you would imagine. So lots of benefits, whether that's just good old-fashioned distribution lists for Gmail to email a large group of people, sharing Drive files and folders in Google Drive, shared Drive permissions for the feature of Google Drive called Shared Drives, inviting 20, 30, 40 people to a calendar event, using it for Google Sites permissions for who can edit the site and things like that, and even access to Google+. And there's more on that list, but giving you a quick preview there of why Google Groups can be so important to your successful G Suite environment, making it easy for users to collaborate well and to share easily. All right, let's take a look at service management. And again, we work with a lot of organizations and schools across the US and Canada. And one of the main things we focus on in working with those IT departments is the responsible administration of these services within G Suite. All of these core services that are on that core services list are covered by the EDU Privacy and Support Agreement. That's why you can use them with G Suite for Education. But it's still up to you as the administrators of your own environment to make those decisions and to custodially provide these as you see fit. So a lot of these services, come originally from the G Suite for Business world. They are not configured for education from the start. Even though we filled out that form, we asked for a G Suite for Education domain, the default settings here are going to be just some standard default settings. They may or may not be appropriate for students, in K to 5 or K to 8. They may not be appropriate necessarily for your staff because, you work slightly different than a business would. So making sure you review these features, these services, their settings within them, and make sure they're set appropriately for how you want your environment to run in education is key. How do we turn services on or off? Again, we're going to rely mostly on our OU structure, but there's some other ways to do that as well. Again, if we go back to the admin console here, we have our core services and our additional services. The core ones are covered by the Privacy and Support Agreement, and there's a note here at the bottom of the screen about that. The additional services are not. They're the same service that, the rest of the world and consumers use, so it's under those same terms of use and conditions for those services. You can give those to staff. You can potentially give those to students. That would be your choice to do that as the administrators of your G Suite for Education environment. But you want to be careful with those additional services because they are not, so to speak, protected behind that fence of the core services. For either of these, going into these core services, we can first decide just to carte blanche turn these on or off for all users in this account. And when Google says account, they mean your G Suite account, this admin console, your whole environment here. So that's your quick, broad on-off switch. You could pick something like Hangouts chat, and we could decide to turn that off for all users, regardless of where they live in the OU structure. Outside of doing that, you can then get granular, and we could pick a particular OU, like our elementary OU, and once we're selected on that OU, then we can turn services on or off at that particular level. And we see some terminology here around overriding, because you'd be overriding the inheritance from above, and maybe that goes all the way up to that all user setting. Normally this is on for everyone, but we're going to override that and possibly decide to turn it off at this particular OU. So that's how at an OU level you can flip services on or off, whether it's core or additional. Also very new to the interface is a great ability now to use those Google Groups that we may create. And again, another great use case for Google Groups to decide whether a service is on or off for users. So if our OU structure is just limiting, too many users are in there, we need to just tease out these 10 students or these 12 staff members, we could put them in a Google Group, and then we could turn on a particular service using that Google Group. So maybe the people and the 12 folks in this Google Group are the ones that get Hangouts chat or Jamboard or something like that. So using a Google Group to enable a service is now also an option and can be really powerful as well. One of the other pieces that we really work hard with the schools and orgs that we work with is, again, setting these up appropriately for whatever level of education you're involved in. One of the terms we like to throw around is the nickname walled garden. That means protecting some of these services for younger students, maybe that's K to 8 students or K to 5 students, so that they're not accessible or communicable to the outside world. They have a in-domain only view of that service where they can only use it or communicate with other staff and students within our organization. So that's what we call the walled garden. That can be done with Google Drive or Gmail. So if we were to explore some of the features of something like Gmail, we're going to click on Gmail here. And under advanced settings for Gmail, there is a feature called Restrict Delivery. And given the particular OU that you would select this for, you are telling it that Gmail is going to be internal only for those students. They can only receive and send email to other staff and students within your domain. So we've got restrict delivery down here. That's the setting you'd be looking for if this is something that you'd like to set. And again, you can pick and choose. If you set it at elementary, maybe that's K to 5. If we set it at elementary and middle, then that's maybe covering our K to 8 students. There's other districts out there that maybe do this K-12 for all students. We've also got a similar setting. We'll just show you that one as well under Google Drive. So if we go into the settings for the Google Drive service, our first option here is sharing settings. And again, something that gets overlooked a lot is Google Drive. Everybody thinks about emails and whether students can email and receive to and from the outside world. But what about Drive? That can be, and by default is pretty wide open. We can, for a particular OU, turn off Drive sharing and make sure that they can only share files to and receive files and folders from other staff and students within our school, within our district, within our organization, not from the outside world. So again, we're protecting those younger students using these features. Good digital citizenship. They can practice, learn their mistakes within our walls, and then maybe in 9th grade, then things open up or something like that. So it's great for supporting those digital citizenship initiatives and making sure those students are protected. There's also options in Hangouts chat around whether they can chat with external users or not, and that can be just internal only as well. So you have that option as well. We've maybe added users, we've done our OU structure, we've thought through for the most part what services are going to be on and off. Are we doing Gmail right away? Are they going to get Hangouts chat? Are they going to get this? Are they going to get that? Once that's done, we have an option here and some choices around how users see other users. That's called the directory service. Great image here. Think of that like the phone book. How do we want that to operate? There are a lot of options here under directory. So if we go up here to the main side menu, we have directory, and we can just go to directory settings, and it's going to complain that I haven't saved this window. Let me get rid of that. And we're going to go back to directory settings here. A couple pieces for directory settings. We have, in general, for the directory service as a whole, contact sharing. Do I want contacts to be shared within our G Suite domain and environment? And when we say shared, those are things like I'm typing in an email and I start to type a name in the to field, and it pops up and auto suggests 4 or 5 people within our environment. Did you mean Sally or Bob or Steve or whoever? I'm in Google Drive adding someone to the sharing list, and as I start to type letters of names, that auto suggestion list pops up and people are listed there. That's this directory. When we go to contacts.google.com, we can actually view the entire domain directory, and that's what these settings determine, what's visible and what's not. So we've got some options. We really typically like to see the contact sharing of that directory enabled to promote good collaboration within G Suite. It can be disabled, and basically that auto suggest will not pop up. You have to know the full email address of the person you're trying to communicate or share with and type that in. If this is enabled, you're going to get that help, which, especially for the younger students, is super great and really helps. There's some granular choices here, primary, aliases, things, how you want that displayed. We won't get into that today, but the main choice here is whether you're going to have contact sharing within your directory or not. And then back on the previous screen, we have options here for profile. And again, before we turn users loose in this system, we want to make sure things are protected well. Are they going to be able to change their profile photo? Are they going to be able to edit and change their name? Perhaps these are things you don't want to do. We do see circumstances where inappropriate photos are being used by students for their G Suite profile, or even staff or students go in and change their name in all sorts of crazy ways, then they're not identified properly to the other users in the system. You know, usually you have an HR process or something like that. You'd want those kind of name changes to go through. So under profile, you have some options on whether they're going to be allowed to do that, and you can decide that on a per OU basis. Maybe this is different choices for staff and different choices for students. Also under visibility, there's a great feature here to use custom directories. And this one's a bit of a longer one, but we could, on a particular OU, like a high school OU, say the students at this high school can only see the other students in the school and just the teachers at this school in the directory, in the autocomplete pop-up. And that's determined by, surprise, surprise, Google Groups. We make a custom phone book and we populate the pages of that phone book using Google Groups. And if people are in those groups, then they're displayed in that custom directory. So that's a great option, again, to really target and specialize who you want people to see. Okay, let's talk real quick about access and security. Again, we've made all these decisions. Maybe people aren't even signing in yet because we're getting all our ducks in a row. We want to make sure this is all set properly. Another question is, who has access to this admin console? It potentially is all the settings you could set. We can take the domain down. We can do some pretty major things here. We want to make sure access is controlled, and that's done through a piece called admin roles. If we go back to the main dashboard here, we have this icon here called admin roles, and that basically is who can access what in this admin console. We have some pre-built roles. They feel like groups. They're not officially Google Groups, but they're a role, and then you assign people to that role. Pre-built ones from Google, Super Admin, obviously that initial account you use to create your G Suite environment, you're going to be in Super Admin. Anyone else you put in Super Admin can do and change everything in the admin console. You don't want 12 people in here. We really encourage the schools we work with to have 2 or 3, 4 super admins at the most, because they are sort of the keeper of the keys to the entire kingdom here. Some other pre-built or pre-canned roles from Google, if you just want someone to administer and manage Google Groups, or do user management or service management for turning those core and additional services on or off, you can see those there. And then there's also an ability to create a custom role, and there's where we really recommend you start to look. We want to create roles with just the privileges, abilities that people need to get their jobs done. Maybe putting them in user management is going to be too much. They can delete users, they can move users. If you just want someone to, edit names, change passwords, do a few small tasks, you can make a custom role, select the privileges that you want, and really craft that, and then put the people into there so that they only can do what they need to do. And you see some examples here of custom admin roles, from people that manage Vault to people managing Android settings. Maybe this is someone at a school level that's only able to manage Chrome apps and extensions and make sure those are successfully delivered to the students at that school. That's all they can do here. The console is manage Chrome apps and extensions. So you can really do these in some unique ways. And they are assigned by OU. So you can also make that role and say, this person that I'm putting into this role can only do this task on the users within this OU, or on the Chrome devices within this OU. So you can really focus that. Other best practices then around security. So we set up our admin roles. We ensure only the right people have access to the admin console, and they only have the minimal they need to do their tasks. We're not over provisioning in wild ways, having too many super admins, things like that. We also want to make sure our security and password policies are in place. We can come back here to the main menu and we can go to security. Over here with the shield. And first of all, we have our password policy, and we're not just talking about admin console access. Our password policy under password management here is for the entire G Suite account, for the entire domain. This can be set uniquely per any OU, so this can be different for students than it is for staff. All the common things you would expect to see here. Do you want password complexity enforced, uppercase, lowercase, special characters? It is a minimum 8-character length for your G Suite password, all the way up to 100. You could set this to 10 or 12 minimum for staff, or anything like that that you'd want to do. Are they allowed to reuse previous passwords or not? And perhaps that's an area where maybe you don't want them to do that. And then obviously features on expiry. Every 30 days, every 60 days, I'm going to require people to have to change that G Suite password. So being able to replicate some common password security best practices here in G Suite are super easy using that kind of interface. The other thing you may want to set up, for sure for anyone with admin console access, really for sure for anyone with super admin access, maybe not for your average teacher or average staff person that doesn't access the admin console, but we do have districts and schools and orgs we've met that do go that far, is two-step verification or two-factor. This gets enabled right here within the domain. That just turns it on globally as users now have an option. Your users would then go to their own account properties page here under Manage Your Google Account, enroll their cell phone, to get the text messages or get the application prompting. If their password got compromised or someone saw their password, after putting in your password, it then needs that other form. It needs that cell phone. It needs that prompting. Maybe it's USB security keys, Titan keys from Google or something like that. That would be that extra layer that if your password got compromised, you're still okay because they would need your phone or they would need your security key. So that's a great thing, highly recommended for anyone with admin console access, as I said, for sure. So you may want to think through those before, again, we actually get users signing into the system, make sure the password policy is correct for sure. And then does anyone in our environment need two-step? There's even an option there to actually enforce it and make it required. And that's something you could do for everyone in your IT department or something like that if you wanted to. Last few minutes here, we're going to roll this up with Chrome management because regardless of everything else in the console, you get users in here, you need to have some thought in what your approach to Chrome management is going to be. They may be on Chromebooks, Chrome devices. You may be purchasing a lot of those, but even without that or along with that, we've got Chrome on Windows and Mac as well to consider, whether that's within your walls, in your computer labs and things like that, or even when they go home and they're signing into Chrome on their home PC or home computer to access G Suite. So Chrome management is a key piece, and we want to make sure, if nothing else, we're putting thought into this before we put people out there in the system. Again, management of Chrome here in G Suite for education and in the admin console applies to Chrome devices, which are 4 or 5 different flavors of form factors, but you're very familiar with Chromebooks, Chrome boxes, Chrome bits, Chrome base, all-in-one units. All of those are really ultimately identical. They run Chrome OS and they're a Chrome device, Chromebook being the most popular one for obvious reasons. Again, we've got Chrome browser on Windows, Mac, and technically Linux as well, if you are running Linux in your schools or in your system. There is Chrome on mobile, on your cell phone, on an Android tablet, or even an iPad. There is a few, very small handful of things we can do from the cloud to manage the Chrome experience on those devices, but it's not very much. And don't count on being able to control that very much. That's not the intention within this system to really do that. The Chrome browser on mobile is a significantly different browser than the desktop browser on Windows, Mac, and Linux, or on a Chromebook on Chrome OS. Another great point here, I'm just going to go back, for something other than a Chromebook, a Chrome device. Everything we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes in the console that we would set for Chrome management only happens if they sign into the Chrome browser. And there's 2 pieces to that to make sure you're clear on. If I were to open Chrome on my Windows machine and go to drive.google.com, I'm going to sign into G Suite. Authenticate, I'm in, there's Google Drive, there's Gmail, there's Classroom, off I go. But I haven't signed into the Chrome browser. It's kind of oblivious. It thinks I'm just surfing the internet somewhere. So that was just G Suite sign-in. When you sign into the Chrome browser and you choose to link your data and have that synchronizing happen, that's what really allows us to be device agnostic. That's where the magic really kicks in. But all of the settings, whether that be restrictions, Chrome extensions we want to deliver to students or staff, any of the stuff we'd set here in the admin console doesn't happen if they don't sign in to that Chrome browser on the desktop version. So that's key. You're going to want to train your users on that. There's a lot of different ways now to direct them towards that, to even enforce that or make it a requirement. We're not going to get into all that today, but step 1 is just making sure people are aware of the experience can be very dependent on that happening on those desktop systems. So for Chrome management, we got a lot of different things we can consider here. Force installing apps and extensions, whether users are allowed to get apps and extensions from the Chrome Web Store, and some other settings here. So in the last few minutes here, I'm just going to browse through some of these really quick here. going to jump back to our console. We're going to go to devices, because technically this is device management, all the different devices that could run Chrome. And we're going to go to Chrome management. And the main area where you're going to find all these wonderful things is user and browser settings. So really quickly, if we jump into user and browser settings, there is a very long page here of a lot of different ways to control and affect Chrome in a lot of great ways. And again, everything on this page is dependent on them signing into the browser properly on Windows, Mac, and Linux. If you're on a Chromebook, it just happens. That's why they're so fantastic. You can't not sign into the browser on a Chromebook because it's a browser in a box, as I like to call it. So they're 100% almost foolproof. It's the desktop versions on Windows, Mac, and Linux that we need people to sign in for these things to happen. One of the main areas here is apps and extensions management. That might be your first go-to where, okay, we know people are going to need certain tools, certain extensions. Let's deliver those to them. You want to set the stage. You want to configure and curate your environment so that they don't have to look all over the place and have frustrations. You want them to sign into Chrome or their Chromebook, and things are right there waiting for them. So if you know your users are going to need a certain extension, then we can push that or force install that from here. It's a matter of picking our OU of users that we want to deliver that to. And over here on the side, we can add Chrome apps and extensions from the web store, the Android piece where we can do Google Play Android apps on Chromebooks, and then some other options to do things by actual ID or by URL. So it'd be just a matter of picking a Chrome Web Store app or extension. And as this comes up, we just, search for something here. And then we would select that for a particular OU. And once we select that, we've got options here to just put it on an allowed list, like a whitelist, and let users kind of self-serve. If they do come across it in the web store, they would be allowed to use it. We can force install and just say they will get this on Chrome and on Chromebooks, whether they like it or not. And if it's a Chrome device, Chromebook, we can pin it to the taskbar at the bottom as well. Another key feature here is this choice at the top, something you're going to want to consider right away in a new G Suite environment. Are they allowed to go to the web store and get whatever they want? Perhaps for all of your students, if we go to the student OU, we can change this to block all apps and extensions. They're only going to get what we force install or what we put on that allowed whitelist. Otherwise, they can't just go grab whatever they want. A lot of districts, security stance-wise, are more comfortable with that so that they're not getting the VPN extensions or things that they don't want them to have. They're going to curate that environment and deliver and allow only the things they want. So allow or block is a common choice to consider here, whether that's staff or students or otherwise, and then we can deliver those pieces through this interface. There's an element of a custom web store. You can have a custom web store for your district. If I were to just jump here to the Chrome Web Store, I can type and take a look at that, you're going to see when I go to the web store, it's been set for my particular account as a staff member that I'm going to go to the staff version for our district of the web store. And here are some recommended apps or extensions. And you can build that collection, this recommended list, to direct people and say, hey, this is what we like. We've tested it. We're providing in-service training. You can come here and get it. And that's a great thing to do for students or for staff, is to have this custom collection on the web store as a starting point to kind of steer them in the direction that you want. Lots of great settings. If we go back to the main user settings page, I think we're getting a little bit short on time, but there's things there, and you can use the search at the top of the page to find those. I'm just going to go back to the settings here, and we can come here to the filter for this page, and we can look for things like safe browsing or safe search. So I'm just going to put in the word safe, and we have right here google.com safe search automatically to block inappropriate search results. Safe browsing protects them from malicious sites with malware and bad code so that they can't go to those sites and gum up your Windows machines in the labs, hopefully, and things like that. Google's going to keep that running database of those sites and prevent access to those sites. Password manager and browser history. Maybe we want to make sure that students can't clear their browser history. So if we go to history here at the top, on the filter and just jump to that section because it's a long page, we can determine whether students' browser history is always saved, and we can prevent them from clearing that browser history. You don't want the kids to cover their tracks, and before you get to that Windows machine or otherwise, they've already blown away all the records of where they surfed and where they went. Password Manager is that wonderful Chrome feature that prompts you, hey, do you want me to remember that login and password you just put into that website? It sounds great from a consumer personal perspective, but in education, that might be a bad thing. Maybe that's the login and password the teacher puts into the student information system, and you don't want that saved in Chrome in case they leave their machine unattended and a student walks up to it, things like that. So will students and staff be able to use the Chrome Password Manager? And then the entire ecosystem that's ever evolving of Android apps with the Google Play Store on Chrome OS and on Chromebooks, and your ability to run those apps pretty seamlessly and deliver them to users and students as well. All pieces for you to look into. Really quickly, the world of Chromebooks. If you haven't purchased anything yet, and you're going to be doing this for a new G Suite environment, you purchase them with a Chrome upgrade license, or basically a management license for the console that you spin up. You can then enroll them and attach them to your admin console. That's done with this Control-Alt-E function at the very first startup screen, kind of fresh out of the box. Lots of great links here on how to enroll a device, how to power wash or wipe them, how to do a full factory image recovery using a USB flash drive. That's all there, but that's something you're going to have to do if you're going to get a few hundred or thousand Chromebooks. You're going to have to go through this process of enrollment. Then within the admin console, we have Chrome device management settings, and I'll just show you right here, whatever OU we're on in this settings window, we can immediately flip to the device settings, meaning Chrome OS devices like Chromebooks. And I'm timed out from talking too much, but on that page, we've got great settings around restricting sign-in. We can make our Chrome devices and Chromebooks only allow sign-in of our users, not personal, gmail.com or otherwise, only abcschool.com accounts can sign in. We can autocomplete the login screen to put at abcschools.com. Our younger students don't have to type that. They just type their username to the left of the @ sign. Less typing, ease of access gets way better. You know, whether we're using one-to-one Chromebooks, kids each have their personal Chromebook, or whether they're shared in carts, there's a lot of settings around how we deal with profiles on those Chromebooks. Managing the versions, your upgrade license allows you to control, manage the versions. If you want to hold your Chromebooks at version 80 because of your testing software, that's what you're going to have the ability to do under the Chrome device management section we are looking at right here. We can determine when they're going to do their updates, and you can stagger those to load balance them on your network and your internet pipe. There's a lot of different attributes and device details you can plug into Chrome devices and Chromebooks. User, location, notes, things like that, so that you can better identify them here in the console. Our labs team also has a great, again, Google Sheets-based lightweight tool where if you need to do things in bulk, you can manage thousands of Chromebooks with a couple clicks. You can move them, update them, deprovision them in bulk, update their attributes, do all sorts of lookups and queries into the data of who's using those Chromebooks, what version they're all at across your fleet in one pane of glass, lots of great things like that. And that's a tool for those of you in the US and Canada that's available to you through the links there. And there's a great free trial if you want to pick up that tool and see what it shows you about your Chrome OS fleet within your G Suite domain. To wrap up here, one of the things we do offer schools in the US and Canada, if you're thinking of starting G Suite right now because of this push for remote learning and everything going on right now in the world, we have a Google for Education Kickstart service. This is a hands-free white glove service where we meet up with you, we discuss what you need out of your G Suite domain, get some feedback, get some questions answered, and then we go and we configure the entire G Suite domain for you. Thousands of settings in the admin console, all set to good EDU best practices by our consultants. We then review that with you over a 2-hour training call. You get a 50 to 60 page document outlining what we've set in your domain, but more importantly, why we've set it that way for your particular needs in education. It takes around a 3 to 4 week process to get that done with us. It also comes with a package of 10 support hours so that after we get this perfectly configured EDU domain off the ground for you, those support hours, we can work with you to sync with Active Directory, to get your users created, to give you additional training on Google Vault or shared drives or anything else that you need. And that 10 hours of support also allows you to call us throughout the course of an entire year if you need any help. All comes with that Kickstart package. So if you're looking to fast track this, and there is an expedited option available as well that takes it from that 3 to 4 week process. If you're in a big hurry right now, which some of you may be, that'll draw it down to around 8 to 10 business days at the most, and we'll have this turned around and back to you for sure as well. So links there if you're interested in that kind of white glove style service from us. It allows you to not make some of the mistakes and have some of those pitfalls while you're trying to get G Suite off the ground in the first year. We've done it all. We've seen it all and talked to thousands of schools. So we'll avoid all that and get you set up for success right out of the gate. And that's what our Kickstart service can do for you. That is the end of this EDU on Air. We want to thank everybody for being here. If you want more information on what we do for schools in North America, you can email us at info@amplifiedit.com. And that link is there on the screen for you. And I want to thank everybody for attending. And hopefully that information was helpful. And if we can help you out in any way, just let us know. Thank you.